Good day and hello. My name is Brian, and today I'm going to tell you about some of the tools of thought I use to work through certain problems. To make it a little bit easier to remember some of these, is I'm going to give the name of how I remember it, and then explain it. When I give the name, I'm probably going to give it twice, make it a little easier to remember, and also because some of the names aren't like single words or couple words. They might be a sentence or a phrase themselves. Alright, so the first tool is, what is the first question? I'll say that again. What is the first question? The way I use this tool is very simple. I use it many different ways, but in this example I'm going to show you how I use it for the idea of branching in conversation. Basically is whenever you actually talk to someone something, you might have a question about something. Well, you ask that question and the conversation then shifts from whatever you were talking about into trying to describe what that word was. That would be the first question. In which case that gives you a signpost that you can then go back to and go back to your original conversation with what you knew. It makes it very easy to go back through different points in a conversation and talk about things. Basically it's the idea of a signpost. The way I remember it, though, like I said, is what is the first question? Because most conversations are usually a back and forth with questions and explanations of what you're talking about, right? Number 2, freedom of choice. I'll say that again. Freedom of choice. Now, what I mean by this is, of course, well, think of any of the freedoms that you know of, or what you might consider a freedom. Now, I usually use in this example the idea of some of the freedoms that everyone's pretty common or familiar with, such as the ones granted in the U.S. Constitution. So, say freedom of speech. I'd phrase it this way. Freedom of speech is the freedom to choose of what you say, and also possibly the choose of what you will not say. Again, think about that. Freedom of choice, you can actually frame any of the freedoms as a freedom of choice. There you go. Number 3, pause. Now, this one is actually a lot of ways a safety piece, and also it helps you also work out different problems. Pause is a very useful tool. One way I sort of describe this is usually for a smoker's routine, or a way to change habits. It's probably a better way to phrase this. First, of course, you have to look at your habit, whatever it is, but you also have to stop and pause and think about what you do for that habit. Now, a lot of people want to change their habits, but part of changing a habit isn't first one being aware of the habit, but also looking at different points. Depending on the habit, it might be very difficult to change. So my addition to a habit is actually to think about what the habit is and find a point where I want to put a pause in, a point where I'd actually stop, and for many different reasons look around and stuff. Like for a smoker is, you have a cigarette, so before I actually light the cigarette, I'll pause for various reasons. Because since it's such a habit, I might automatically just light up the cigarette when I actually got it for someone else. So I put a pause there, because I'll pause, look around, go, why am I lighting the cigarette? Oh yeah, I was giving it to this friend. Or maybe again, it's just asking, why am I lighting the cigarette? It's a pause. Very simple. So you can then decide on whether or not you actually really want to have it, or if you don't. There you go. Very simple. Let's see. Now we're working to a bit more advanced topics in some ways. Number 4, encirclement. Encirclement is, for me, a very useful phrase in this case, because the idea is I try to go around things as much as I can, because then everything inside is the thing that you're trying to look at, the thing you're trying to think about, whatever it might be in such a case. Whatever you're trying to describe. The idea of a story is, in some ways, it encircles the certain things that you want to teach and learn. Or maybe just it's a good story. You know, it's a pretty useful thing. Basically, the idea is how far out and around can you go around this thing? And everything inside that is then that thing. Right? I mean, it's a way of thinking of like borders, you know. Around the edge of, let's say, the United States, well, everything inside is the United States, right? And you can work that all the way down to everything else, to a lot of different things. Makes it very simple. All right, number 5, scale. Scale is a very useful tool in this case because, again, it's the same thing I'm dealing with the idea of the United States. You can scale down from that into different states, different towns, down to different neighborhoods. You know, that's a scale, looking down. You can also scale the other way, and of course look further and further out. So you can go further than the United States, you can go North America, you can go Northern Hemisphere, you can go world, and you can also go out to maybe the solar system and then work out your way further out. Again, that's the idea of scale, is you can go either direction. All right. Number 6, extrapolation. Now, extrapolation is a very, very simple thing. It sort of works with the first two, because the first thing is you encircle a certain idea you want, and then from there you scale it outwards one way or the other. You extrapolate what it would look like or possibly what it could be like at a certain scale outwards or inwards if you're going whatever direction you're going. And that's what extrapolation is, basically, is combining those two to make it a little bit easier to think about. All right. Now, the thing is, I sort of can sum up those 3 tools into a single image, which you might have already grasped somewhat with the way I was talking about scale. Think of it as a piece of glass, like a lens. You have your microscopes, your pair of glasses, and you have a telescope. Basically, they're all the same thing, doing the same stuff, doing the same thing I just described. But just like those tools, is another way you can think about it, is you can also flip them around. Because they're all doing the same thing, it's just in different directions. And, of course, the number 7 tool is called flip. All right. Now we're going to work into some of the really interesting ones. Number 7. Sorry, that was number 7, flip. We're now working into number 8, the silver rule. The silver rule is very simple. It says, do not do to others what you would not want to do to you. Very simple. You know, the idea is basically don't go around beating people up because they'll probably beat you up. You know, it's basically don't do something that you wouldn't want someone to do to you. Very straightforward. Nice thing about that, of course, is you don't really have to think too hard on it. You just go, I don't want to do that have someone do that to me. Very simple. And of course, the nice thing is the next step up would be just to not do anything to some degree. You know, it's a very neutral, passive thing. Like I said, you don't have to do a lot of thought on it. Now, number 9, the golden rule, does take a little bit more thought. The golden rule is the outgrowth of the silver rule. It promotes you to try to do stuff. The golden rule says, do for others what you would like them to do for you. Now, an example would be is like, I'm usually very, very polite. Why? Because I like people to be polite back. You know, it's showing people what you'd like them to do back to you. So, you can actually sum up both rules, the silver rule and the golden rule, number 8 and 9, as leading by example. Except, of course, with the silver rule is you do not want to lead by example. You don't want to show them how to beat other people up because you don't want them to beat you up. The golden rule is, of course, to do the nice things, the things that you'd like people to do back to you. Be polite, you know, whatever else you want to use it for. And, of course, the thing is you don't always have to be extreme on that case. You know, you have to do a little bit just to show what you mean. And then, of course, as you receive it back, you can improve or adjust and show, like, you know, hey, like the idea of to get respect, you have to give respect. If you apply that with this very simple thing, is you don't always have to give full-on respect. You give a little bit of respect to show what it is. If you receive it back, you give a bit more, but you stay at that level of showing what respect is. You might have to increase it a bit to get the point across or explain what you're doing. Very simple stuff, but you have to show it so that you can show what you mean. Alright, well, that's most of them. This one's really, I guess you could say, somewhat advanced in some ways. Because using all the prior tools, it makes it very easy to do this, but that's the reason it's very advanced. Because you have to actually sort of get very good at using the first tools to get really good at doing this tool. But it leads to some very interesting things. And a lot of these tools sort of all reflect back to each other and have many similar pieces. So you'll see that once you actually start looking through some of this stuff. Number 10, meditating upon a word. That's the way I sum it up. That's my phrasing I use to remember it. There's many different ways to explain it, but I like that way of phrasing it. Meditating upon a word. The way I usually try to explain this is think of a word, and then think of how do you teach that word to someone without using that word to describe it. So, obviously, if you wanted to describe money to someone, what is money? Well, without me showing you any actual physical examples or life experiences, how would I explain that, what it is, without actually using it? And that's basically what I mean by meditating upon the word, is how to do, work all the things back and forth through and how to explain it as if in a story in some ways, or through certain circumstances and stuff that you find easy to compare with between people that already know certain things. Very simple. And those are my tools for thought. I hope you all have a beautiful day.